Good evening, everybody. Welcome. It's another Saturday. It is what it is the third week of February. It moves very fast. But we're here, uh, and I'm excited to be here. I'm not alone. I have one of my best friends with me, one of his real close. My brother from another mother is here with me today, and I'm glad that he's here. And we're going to talk about some stuff. It's going to be good. I hope you all are well. If you have not had a chance, catch up on the past episodes that we've had. There've been some great conversations and a lot of, I think, interesting things. And I hope you know you'll enjoy it. But today we're here talking today with one of my close friends. We've known each other. I want us to try not to date our friendship because I mean, we're older now. We're grown men, but we met each other in our teenage years. So we got about a good 25 under our
It's
belt.
good 25. It's more than that, but it's a good 25.
Yeah, probably like a week 30, but like a good solid 25 up under
Absolutely.
our belt. Dr. Marcus Campbell is an educator. He is creative. He's a father. All of these things, and he's here with us. And so, welcome, brother. Good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
having me.
I'm glad you're here. You good?
I'm good, man. It's a good day, to be live and
Yeah.
to be in well in mind, spirit, and body. So, how about yourself? How you doing?
I can't complain. I'm in DC, so it's been 60 here all week. So I had what can I have no complaints, right? Like I dodged the whole winter basically.
You know, DC is south of the Mason-Dixon line, so you're in the south.
You had to do that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so I'm good. I don't have any complaints. Thank you for being here again with me. Before we deep dive into our conversation, I'm always interested in um, what we do because I think what we do is kind of an extension of our person. I know you, and so what you do seems very natural to me. But I want to talk a little bit about, your vocation and how you got into it and what piqued your interest early on. And was it something you always wanted to do, or did you kind of evolve into it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm an educator and I've been a teacher for quite some time. I started teaching in 2001, so it's been 21 years that I've been in education. I've always wanted to be a teacher. Around the time I started preaching
Mhm.
as a teenager, I also knew I wanted to teach teenagers. So I've been doing that. Now I'm the assistant superintendent and principal and exploring superintendencies and been doing that for 20 years. Kind of evolved into my world and my work as an educator. Wanted to help Black boys. Saw a lot of crazy stuff happening to young Black men on the South Side of Chicago, and so I went to U of I in Champaign-Urbana in Illinois, and then went back to the Chicagoland area to teach English. Did that for 10 years while I was simultaneously preaching and pastoring and doing all that.
Mhm.
All those worlds seem very uh, relational to me. They're very close worlds to be teaching English and preaching.
Mhm.
They go hand in hand for me. And now I'm no longer a pastor per se, but I'm the assistant superintendent and principal at a Chicago north suburb of Chicago, Evanston. And it's a shepherding role too, but it's
Right, it's
not,
pastoring by different means.
it's a
But
pastor by different. So my life just continues to take the path that I guess God would want it. So I'm happy with what I do. I'm very blessed to love what I do every day.
Yeah, so you and I met as teenagers. We both sang with the Soul Children of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a lot of our friendships that we still have to this day, very close
Mm-hmm.
friendships, were started when we were teenagers, and we've just been in each other's lives through every up and down, through every, whatever it is. We've been there with each other. But I want to take a minute just to talk about your experience with the Soul Children, right? Because um, somebody asked me the other day, well, how is it, you're able to do what you do in terms of public speaking or whatever it is you do? You seem so comfortable. I was like, well, I've been doing this for a minute, right? We were trained as kids how to perform and what the stage were and hitting marks and knowing how to speak and all of those things. And I know I still use a lot of those skills that I learned in. What was that experience for you?
Yeah, similar. I was a quiet kid, shy kid, and I learned how to perform outside of my personality.
Mhm.
And so, getting on stage with all of that music in your head, with all of those notes, with all of those changes, with all those moves, whether we were on live TV in the studio or just at a Baptist church on the west side.
Yeah.
That there's a certain skill set that you have that you've prepared, and you're used to being in front of people. You're used to knowing how to be confident and stand, and what you've rehearsed and what
Mhm.
you've practiced. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it has benefited me in so many ways. In my role as a teacher, that's performance, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's improv a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Performance and actually preaching, whether we talk about it or not, there's a certain cadence and there's a certain deliverance.
Performance.
That's performance. And so, I don't like the stage, Pat, but I can do it.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
I think what I've noticed is there are some people who love the stage, right? In terms of
Yeah.
they can't live kind of without it. I think you and I are built like we'll do it. I
Yeah.
don't want to live there, right? I want to I want to come back to quiet and let me have, my space. And so I think it's real interesting how our personalities develop and being able to incorporate that kind of public skill, but then kind of in our personality, we're maybe shy and introverted, kind of more inner directed than most people. And I get this. I get accused of this, but it is totally not true that I don't like people. I totally love. No, I love people, and I love hanging out with my friends. Right? I get up for that, and I miss that because, of course, through the pandemic, we haven't been able to hang out. I just can't do that on a continuous loop, and I don't think you would want me to. I think,
We don't want you to. We
right, you
know.
don't want me to have a nap or something and kind of power down for a minute and then come back up. So I'm just amazed at people who live for that and kind of never get off that space, get out of that space. That's amazing to me.
It is amazing, and I guess that too is a pathway for those folks, who want to be there. They live it, they breathe it, they thrive in it, and that's just not us. It's funny. I tell the faculty and the staff all the time. I said, I'm really quiet by nature.
Mhm.
I have to, go through the halls and with the kids and I'm with the teachers and the parents, and that's a lot of work for me as an
Yeah,
introvert.
yeah,
Sometimes you're right. I just need to go home and take a nap so I can reset and then I can go do it again. But I
absolutely.
can't keep that on a constant loop either. I do it well, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at people who draw energy from that. Like the more they do it, the more energy they get. It for me, it depletes me
That's
on
right.
some level, right? I need to be able to kind of have time to power down so I get my energy up to do it, and then I'm giving it, and then like when I don't have it anymore, like I need to shut down and get my life together.
I had somebody just start talking to me at the gym today. I'm like, why are you talking to me?
Exactly. Right. That. Like,
I want to talk to you.
I totally get
Okay.
it. Like I just came here to, do my thing. I mean,
Yeah, I don't need to talk.
I thought I get it. I get it. We're both church kids,
Yeah,
and
church.
we both went into ministry very, very early on in our lives. How looking back, because now we have some perspective, how do you process being a young man, young black man in the black church, and you were Baptist in your tradition. I was Pentecostal in my tradition. Um, Looking back, how was that? How did that shape you?
Was your dad Baptist though?
Yeah, so my dad and my grandmother were Baptists, came from Greater Union, came out of Greater Union Baptist Church
Yeah,
over there on the west side. My
yeah,
mom was Pentecostal,
yes.
right? So she was Church of God in Christ.
Yeah.
So I had a balance of that.
You're Baptist.
Before there was a name for it, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
before there was a name for it, it was that.
Yeah. So I look back on that time. I was 15,
Mhm.
and I thought it was and my dad's a pastor. His brothers are pastors. My cousins are pastors. At one point, there were 10 pastors in my family, Pat.
Mhm.
Baptist pastors.
Mhm.
Baptist born, Baptist bred, and when they died, they were Baptist dead.
Baptist
They were
day.
those, they
Absolutely.
were those kind of Baptist folks.
Right.
And but I look back, I continue to evolve in my thinking about what that really meant for me in my life.
Mhm.
Clearly, it was the time it was what I needed to do when I needed to do it, but how that progressed and what I thought that was supposed to mean for my life
Mhm.
changed over time. It changed as I grew as a man. It changed as I grew in the Lord, and it changed as I just matured. So I look back fondly on it, but I also recognize that there was me living living someone else's expectations of what I thought that was,
Right.
that I don't have regrets over. It's just that was a challenge for me, and so I always thought I was different because I
Mhm.
wasn't a hooping Baptist kid, right? I wasn't one of those,
Right.
and I thought that I was, breaking the mold by not being such a hooper, but I was very much in the mode, um, pretty rote, very trite, but also trying to do what I thought was best. And you know, uh, we grow and we learn, right? We learn.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what was your early definitions of love?
Mm,
Right. Where did you get your ideas and definitions about the concept of love itself?
that's a good question because um, I didn't have one. The definition that I had of love was maternal and paternal, right? It was my mom to me, and me to my mom. And but a male to female or some sort of eros kind of love, I didn't have a model for that.
Mhm.
I thought that I thought I had it, but I didn't. And so my very first understanding or concept of love was from my mom, who's she passed away a couple months ago. And as I reflect back, I'm thinking about, oh, when my mother did this, that was love, and when she did that, that was love. And my god sister said to me on social media the other day that your joy was your mother's life's work. And I said, you are exactly right. Now that I think about it, like in hindsight, and so that was love to me. My
Mhm.
mother just loving on me, holding me accountable, making sacrifices, and not really thinking of herself, but thinking it just about me. And I grew up rather whole, right, without any significant attachment disorders or anything like that,
Right.
because I had a really firm sense of self, because how my mother loved me, and my dad loved me too. It was
Mhm.
different, My dad had a different way of expressing his love.
Mhm.
It was more about providing and provision. It wasn't really about affection. So I didn't really get a lot of affection from my father.
Mhm.
But both of that combined, I think, made for me to feel confident in who I was as an individual. I
Mhm.
never felt insecure. I never felt loveless. I never felt that no one loved me because it was either my mother, my father, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my extended family. And then when I became, a little older, I met all y'all, and that filios love, right, of friendship, um, was also another definition of love. And so I would have to say it's my mom
Yeah.
and my dad and my immediate family that really taught me what love was. Well, they modeled, I should say.
Right.
They modeled what love was.
Yeah. And so I'm the same way. Like I grew up fully furnished with care and love. I had my parents, and then I had my grandmother who, doted on us or whatever. So I felt very insulated and very secure. What I learned very later on when I started dating was that there could be a woman who was absolutely gorgeous, but she wasn't warm emotionally. And that's just either her personality, her kind of her energy, her ethos, whatever it was. And I began to realize I am more attracted to a love that is kind of more effervescent and warm and nurturing, and it has shades of mothering kind of love, but it's just an atmosphere, right? And so I know that shapes us. My issue was there was never a conversation that says, this is what love is, right? Like these are the markings of love. This is what needs to be here. And nobody ever explained it, just like nobody ever explained death, right? I remember as a kid, my mother's aunt, she was very, very close, she passed away. And I remember going to the funeral home, and I was so short, like my head only came up to to the, top of the casket. That was what it was. And I could see she was upset. And I could see other people was upset. But nobody explained to me like what is happening, right? Like why are we here? And why isn't she talking? And what is this place that we're in, right? So there were things in our, maybe it's our culture, I'm not sure, that are acted out but are never given words, or concepts for us as like kids to kind of understand. Oh, this is, I had to piece together. Oh, well, this is what death is. Oh, well, what is a wedding? Why are we here? And why is everybody dressed up? And like why, those kinds of things. Did that, not having that conversation for you, did it hinder or did it help when you started dating teenage years and started in seeing women, girls a little differently than you had when you were younger?
It definitely was a hindrance, but I want to kind of piggyback on what you're saying about like uh, these moments at the altar, right? When we get saved, we go to the altar. When we get married, we go to the altar. When we die, we go to the altar. And the only conversation that my father, who did a lot of eulogies, right, because he was pastor, did a lot of eulogies. I remember him doing one eulogy, one funeral. That was a Saturday after rehearsal. I was going to the church. I was
Mhm.
in his office and I was watching and listening to the service on the monitor. And he comes back and he's changing to go to the cemetery. And I said, Dad, don't these things all like run together at some point? Like they're all the same. He said, no. He says, every one of these is different because everybody lives a different life. That was the only conversation really about death that I had, but I kind of understood what I thought that he meant. But
Mhm.
conceptually, nobody talked about death like explicitly and what it was, other than what we could, the ear hustling from the sermons, Jesus died, Jesus rose, etc. And it was the same about dating and love and marriage. Not a single conversation. My
Mm.
my dad saying something like, make sure you wear a raincoat. And he was talking about a condom. And I was like, okay,
Yep.
okay, you know. But it's interesting that when people go to weddings, right, and then they go to funerals, I think what folks fail to realize is that those are moments where when you go, it is your responsibility to support those folks who are on the at the front after that particular proceeding is over. So
Mhm.
you go to a wedding, you stand with that couple, right? Through the thick and thin, and helping them along the way. And when you go to funerals, you're supposed to stand with the family, after that body's in the ground, because these are such big life moments and life transitions. Nobody told me that. Nobody told me what the journey is after, the wedding, right? They didn't talk about the marriage. No one talks about after you've buried or after you have gone to the repast, that there's a process after that. And so the all of the feelings and what comes up after these big moments are really important and key. So I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I had, as a young preacher, I had an expectation that I need to find a girlfriend, get married, and have kids, right, and do some premarital counseling, right. That was the baseline. It wasn't about examining what it meant to be a man. It was none of that. But
Right.
I gotta say, I gotta say, there was one pastor in my life that did. I just had no idea what it was about. It was B.J. Tatum at Canaan Baptist Church in Urbana, Illinois.
Mhm.
Every Saturday was a men's class, and he talked about all of these things,
Mhm.
all of the stuff. It was almost like he talked about all the stuff, right? I
Right.
mean, all of the granular things about marriage and relationships, and what is the man's role and responsibility. There's some patriarchy built in there,
Mhm.
but it was, I had no idea what he was setting before me, so I took it as intellect, right? And
Right.
like, oh, these are good sermon tidbits. I had no idea that these were really life things that I was supposed to be living. That
Yeah.
was a brief time, and after graduating from college, I didn't have Tatum in my life anymore, and I ran into some problems.
So, you got married early, as did I. We all got married. It's a whole group of us that got married about the
I
same.
remember you got married.
Yeah, it was probably within 5 years of each other or something like. A lot of us, a lot of our friends got married. Um, what did you think marriage was going to be?
And I don't know. I had no idea. Well, I knew marriage was about sex, right?
Number one.
I knew marriage was about sharing a house, right? I knew marriage was probably about having kids, but I did not know fundamentally
Mhm.
what marriage was. I had no idea what my vows meant. I
Mhm.
said them. I thought
Mhm.
I knew what they possibly meant, but I did not know
Mhm.
what that would take. I wasn't even mature enough to know like what was really coming out of my mouth. So I didn't know what marriage was at all. I didn't have it modeled well,
Right.
at all. So I was completely clueless. But the challenge is, I thought I knew, right? I thought I knew that, oh, I'll get married, everything will just be fine. But the challenge is interesting for as I think about it. The challenge that I had is that my dad died May 17th, and I got married July 17th.
Mm.
And nobody talked to me and processed with me about my grief,
Yeah.
right? And I got married 2 months after that. And so
Mhm.
my whole first year of marriage, I was grieving and
Yeah,
didn't
you were in a
know.
couple of different places at the same time.
Completely different place. I bought a house that I
Yeah.
shouldn't have bought that was 2 blocks from the house that my father died in because I was
Yeah.
grieving. So I had no idea. I
Yeah.
just was lost. I was a lost kid who thought he had enough spiritual wisdom to figure it out, but didn't have a clue.
Right. What was your biggest shock about marriage?
That I could get so angry. I had no idea I could get that angry.
Mhm. Mhm.
that we would argue like we argued, and I would be so mad. I had never seen myself like be so angry, and I didn't know I was selfish.
Mhm.
I had no idea.
Mhm.
No idea how
Yeah.
selfish I was.
Right.
I thought I was emotionally mature. I wasn't. I thought I was giving. I wasn't. And I'm like, I think back like, oh my God.
Right.
So that was my biggest shock. It was about me, right? And what I didn't know, what I wasn't prepared for. Um, I was shocked at that. I was shocked at the fact that somebody would disagree with me, right? Somebody had a different way of doing things. Somebody lived different. Somebody had different habits in the house. So I mean, I didn't like. What do you mean?
Yeah. Right. 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 Right.
What do you mean you leave the cap off the toothpaste? Everybody puts the cap back on.
Who does that? Right.
Who
Like.
does that, right? So yeah, and just being very dogmatic and wrote about the way I thought the world should be,
Mhm.
and not really extending a lot of grace to her, and really not understanding my presence in the home and what that meant to her.
One of the things that was most shocking to me was the emotional difference,
Hmm.
right? Like just two different temperatures or whatever. And of course, this was the first person I had lived with outside of my parents' house. This is the first woman that I've cohabitated with. And it's like we leave in the morning, everything is fine. By the time we get back home, you are totally something is going on and happened, and I'm just trying to get the person who I left the house with. I want that person back or whatever. And I realized how emotionally unintelligent I was.
Hmm.
Right? Just not is it's not that you don't care, you don't know how to care, right? And early on, well, if something's wrong with you, or I can't fix it, then I'm gonna leave you alone. Like I just it's nothing I can do. And when that keeps happening, you feel like, oh, I'm failing at this, right? Because nothing that I seem like I'm able to do is able to solve problems or alleviate whatever emotional angst that you're in, and we're stuck in this cycle, and we're being horrible to each other because nobody's needs are getting met, right? Um, and and it becomes bitter, it becomes evil, it becomes cantankerous. And it was just like, well, a minute ago we was just, we were just in love, or whatever we thought that was, or whatever. And maybe like 6 months later, it is like, what the, what, what is this? Like, what is this that we're in? And so again, I think to put us in context, right? When you're early 20s, what do you know about life? What do you know about love? What do you know about sex? What do you know about women? Like totally ignorant of
Totally.
like and my godmother, God bless her. When I told her, I love her to this day for this. I told her, I was like, well, I think we're gonna get married. She was like, just go fornicate. Why you get married? And thinking back, thinking back, probably I could have saved myself a lot of grief. But we're church kids, right?
Church kids.
So we can't fornicate without a guilty conscience, because if they didn't talk to us about love, if they didn't talk to us about manhood, if they didn't talk to us about all of the things that we needed, what they did tell us was not what not to do with our bodies, right? It was They had a whole lot of conversations about what you're not supposed to do and run and don't be going slipping and dipping and don't be doing all of this other kind of stuff. My father's line to me about sex was, "Don't bring me no babies." Okay, well, I don't. Okay, that was about all of it, and so our ideas about love, sex, emotional intimacy, and all of those things, we were like learning on the fly. And perhaps for you, maybe for me, perhaps for you, the marriage did not have the success because I was not as furnished as I needed to be, um, as a person, right? As a human being, and especially if your idea, my idea of love was warm and nurturing, and then you kind of bring a woman into your life who's not that. she she's not that, and so now I don't feel loved. This isn't warm, this isn't affectionate, and there are myriad of reasons why, but this is, at the base of it, who you are. And so when did you know, like, we're not going to make it?
I don't think I didn't know that until it was the day of the Mother Emanuel shooting, right? The service for those folks, and Barack Obama was on TV singing "Amazing Grace," and we were having a conversation about what to do, and we couldn't agree, we couldn't get there, and then I'm thinking we're probably not going to make it, but we, I think what I was concerned all along, but I figured, it'll work out. It'll be fine. But things were escalating, and there was a compounding effect that was happening in my life. Right, I was getting more responsibility at work. Um, the shift in my thinking about what ministry was, I thought I was going to be a teacher, leave teaching, pastor full time, and boom. But that was being altered by me getting more responsibility at work, and God opening doors there for some marketplace stuff, which I didn't understand. And I didn't know how to deal with my stress. I didn't know how to deal with the shifting in what I thought was supposed to be for my life, but wasn't. And I was acting out in so much fear, right? I didn't know it was fear at the time. I was just angry. But I was acting out in so much fear because I was like, I thought I was gonna pastor. Dang, I mean, I was pastoring, but the church wasn't like that. When I'm boom, it's gonna be like my dad's church, which was the only model that I really had.
Mhm.
And then, as I said, it was more responsibility at work and all of these other things. And so I didn't really have the tools to understand myself and the changes that were happening. And so I was angry at home, and then I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And she's talking, well, I need you, blah, 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 da, da, da. And I'm like, I'm here. What are you talking about? So, so I ended up moving out because I thought that the house was stressful, but it wasn't that necessarily the house was stressful. It was my understanding, my lack of understanding about how to deal with all of these changes in my life that was really that was the stressor. So I made my marriage and my wife the bad object, and it wasn't necessarily her. This is all hindsight, of course.
Sure.
And so I didn't have the tools to deal with the changes. I didn't have the tools to deal with these false expectations of what I even thought marriage was. Because even we bought the house, built the house, had all of this square footage, had the two kids, and we were still having issues. And I didn't have the tools, didn't have the maturity, really didn't understand. You talk about being emotionally immature and all of that. I didn't have any of that.
Mhm.
And now I'm like, oh, and it's been 10 years, now,
Sure. Now you can see it in hindsight. Oh, that's
you know, but I didn't, there were so many compounding factors,
Mhm.
in my life at the time, and she had them too. But there were so many compounding factors in my life that I didn't understand what role is this have in and how is this impacting my partner? Like, how should we be relating? How should we be talking? And all of that. And big part of problem that I had, I didn't think I needed to grow. I thought I had it all figured out, right? And so when things started changing, it completely sent me into like disequilibrium
Right.
spiritually, emotionally, professionally. As a dad, I'm sure I was in disequilibrium. I was certainly there as a husband, and just because I had no idea and I didn't have anybody talking me through and walking me through. All they said, well, you just need to stay. And do what? I don't have the tools.
Right.
I don't even know how to have the conversation. I don't
Right.
even know what I don't know, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So, and while all of that's happening, job, kids, house, all of that, you started pastoring.
I started pastoring a
Yeah.
year after my dad died, still
Okay.
grieving,
Mhm.
still grieving. And
Right.
then toward the end of the marriage, I stopped.
Right. So the difference between you and I was I never was married and pastoring at the same time.
Mhm.
You were married, pastoring, and had all this other kind of stuff going on and pastoring. What was your experience like during that time?
Being married and pastoring,
Yeah.
just completely unnourished in my marriage. I remember getting up early in the morning, making the kids breakfast in the oven, and driving an hour to church, you know, then going out to eat after church, and not nourishing my marriage at all. I
Mhm.
was of the mindset, oh, we're supposed to be doing ministry together, so can you help me with the newsletter, help with the flyer, and help with this and help with that, and blah 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 blah. Completely ignoring my marriage, completely ignoring my wife. I'm
Mhm.
sure I was completely ignoring my kids and had no clue, right? Just didn't have a clue. So it was fine on the surface, but looking back on it, I realized how malnourished we were as a couple, and how we were taking time for the church, weren't taking time for ourselves,
Mhm.
taking time for school. What was happening in Evanston didn't take time for us, and so you know, we played the roles. I mean, we had the roles figured out. You know, we thought we would this, that, and the other. And, you know, I'm the pastor, and she's the first lady, and sometimes she was the co-pastor, sometimes she'd speak. I had no idea what we were doing, like no idea what we were doing. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just completely going through the motions, malnourished, relationally.
So you stepped away from pastoring before you were divorced.
Yeah, I was officially divorced. Yep.
So what were your thinking when it comes to, because you were steeped in ministry from a teenager, I was too, and you're in it, and that's unique because usually young, once you're in the ministry, it's like you never get out of it. Like you're supposed to ride
Yeah,
it out to forever. But you kind of sense some winds changing in your own life, and I remember us talking about it around the time that you did it and afterwards. But what was that like for you? Because I anticipate, or I suppose that was a little grief.
yeah, it was grief, but you know, it was one thing that I discovered is that there were other brothers trying to get out just like me. You know, that made me feel a little.
Yeah, everybody was.
That made me feel a little better. Like, oh, and one, it wasn't you, but it was, but
It was
we,
not me. It was not me. But no.
but another well-known pastor in town pulled me aside. He was like, Marcus, how'd you do it? How'd you get out? I was like, huh? Was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I'm being led to another place. I'm not just trying to check out.
Right.
So I was okay with it because I knew I had a vision in my heart for what I begin to understand about what ministry was supposed to look like for me. So
Mhm.
of course I was like, all right, well, let me just go ahead and transition and do this. But yes, there was a lot of grief, a
Mhm.
lot of grief. Even when I didn't know what was grief, a lot of grief. I mean, from items, people, families, relationships, the items in the church, you know, the routines of going to church in that way, preaching every week,
Mhm.
you know, all of that. I mean, from the furniture to the look, I mean, just everything.
Right.
There was a lot of grief associated with that, and you know what? It took me a while to really come to understand that I was really sad about it. You know, I was just like, oh, I'm just moving on to the next thing. What the Lord said, da, da, da. But no. I was really sad about it. So I'm still learning how to recognize and not push away certain emotions in the name of whatever,
Right.
do good in the name of maturity, in the name of this, in the name of that, because actually it's a really a gross form of immaturity, and lack of understanding. So, but there was a lot of grief associated with that. There were a lot of questions. People didn't understand, why are you walking away from God? Why are you doing this? A lot of church folk. I knew in my heart that God was leading me to the right place. I had confirmation after confirmation after confirmation in church about this, and I knew what the impact. I knew what it would become, and what it was gonna be, and it wasn't the model that I had in my heart, in my mind. So I grieved a lot, and I found myself grieving my marriage, my life, actually, my whole
Yeah,
life.
'cause, I mean, all of this is kind of happening within a certain time frame. Like the
Right,
church, I moved away from the church, and then after that,
right,
the divorce or whatever. That's compounded kind of
yeah.
grief, and then we never talk about publicly anyway. Like I, I didn't want my life to be like this, right? Like this wasn't
It wasn't the plan
was not the plan,
to be
and
divorced and not pastoring. What?
right, all of that, it hits on our ego. It hits us in very sensitive emotional spaces that sometimes we can't talk about and expose. But what was for that moment, specifically with the divorce too, what was your grieving process like?
I just spent a lot of time alone.
Mhm.
I called it a seminary of solitude. you know, I spent a lot of time alone. And let's spend a lot of time in tears. I spent a lot of time um, um, trying to really understand God and myself. I often did feel like a failure. I felt so much shame. Oh, I felt a lot of shame. I married people who still married. I counseled people who still married. I did all of that stuff, and then having to be divorced, and then, moving on with moving the church. And I didn't necessarily lose the church. That didn't happen. I mean, I stepped away,
Mhm.
So, yeah, I carried a lot of shame, and I spent a lot of time alone, 2 or 3 years, just kind of reading and processing, and going to therapy and understanding what that was, and truly trying to figure out, God, did you really want me to do this thing in the schools? In this field of education, you really want, and those doors just kind of kept opening. And so, I found myself being strengthened by the vision ahead of me, although my humanity was terribly sad and terribly broken. I was terribly broken. Um, um, and But it took a lot of therapy, and I stepped away from the routines of church.
Mhm.
I had to really, really step away from that to really find God in this valley of my life.
Yeah. So um, I call those years for me the dark years. Like it was very a lot of depression, a lot of tears, a lot of overeating, a lot of oversex, like just a lot of stuff going on, and we don't talk about how male depression manifests itself in like a few different kind of ways, right? That we find ourselves sometimes acting out in ways that get by us in some ways. And I don't even reckon at that time I couldn't even recognize my own depression, right? Like you're not you. I'm not saying you. For me, and you're in bed with somebody, it's like I don't even want to be here. This is not what I wanted. Like and I don't want to be alone, but apparently I'm not maybe not even worthy to be with somebody, right? And so did it change your perception about women, right? Because for me, I got very suspicious of women, especially when they were overly gave me too much attention and wanted to be in my life. And I'm coming out of a situation where maybe somebody did not think of me in ways where I want to be with you, perhaps. And now some other woman wants to be with me, and her motives could be totally fine. Like, She could genuinely want to be a part of my life, but I question, right? Because I'm burned now. So I don't know. And before you leave me, let me break this, break this up. So I don't have to get hurt again. Right. And I was in that cycle. Like if there was a woman who like I sensed that I could really get attached to, like I totally ran in the opposite direction because I'm nervous, I'm gun shy in terms of my masculinity is took some hits now, and so I don't know if you're gonna get tired of me, or if it's not what you're gonna change your mind. Da, 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 da. And I went, I was in a cycle of all of those things. Was that did that happen for you, or
Yeah.
how did it change your perception of women? If it changed your perception of women.
Really didn't change my perception of women. I found myself trying to figure out, like, it was more. What became dominant for me in that time is my kids. Like, oh, I need to make sure that my kids aren't messed up because of this, right? I gotta find my way to be the kind of dad that can raise boys, without a skewed perception of women and a skewed perception of marriage and family. I got to figure that part out. So
Mhm.
that was one piece. The other piece was, how do I fix this? What do I do to fix this? Do I go back to her? Do I try to fix it with her, or do I try to move on and try to fix it with someone else?
Mhm.
Because I knew early on, I would be married again, right? I ain't married yet, but I knew early on that I wanted to be married again.
Mhm.
And so um, I just began to try to figure out what could I do to for that to happen, right? And then to patiently wait. Because as the introvert I am, I ain't a Mac daddy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not macking folks down. That ain't me,
Mhm.
right? And so um, I had to really, 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 really rely on just chance and circumstance for me to try to figure that out. So I wasn't in my head a lot.
Mhm.
I was, as I said, I was getting so much responsibility at work. My drive was that too. So I had the kids, I had work, and then I had this deep feeling of, I'm going to get married again. I just need to figure out how I'm going to do that and how not to be divorced again. Right? That is you talk about what I'm in my head about is like, oh, I better not get too serious, or I better not, because we get married. Then what happens if we get divorced and da da da. That is where I am, like, dealing with a whole bunch of other things that I'm
Mhm.
trying to, like, just kind of sort through and process through. What does it mean to be committed? What do those vows mean, et cetera, et cetera? Because I don't. And then, second marriages fail more than the first.
Right.
And so, like, how do you not find yourself in that pattern? Because I do want to break the pattern. I find myself wanting to do that. So I didn't fall into that place. I wasn't in that place where you were. I was focusing on the kids, focusing on my career, but I was also thinking, what do I need to do to fix this?
You mentioned therapy, right? And the turning point for me was therapy, right? If I would be a totally different person if I had not got myself into therapy and started untangling. And one of the things I think therapy helps you do is to reframe some things, you know, that take responsibility for your stuff, but all of it wasn't you. Like that was them, or maybe it was the environment you were raised in, or maybe the way you're looking at it, right? It gives you different lens to look at your life. Maybe you're not a failure, right? Um, it's kind of like with me, like when I was a kid. Quick story in Mississippi, and they woke us up early. They had all these. My family had all these acres of land. They woke us up, and on the land there were horses, there were cows. It was a farm. It was like all this cool stuff. They woke us up early to pick for some preserves that they were going to make. So there were apple trees, or the apple orchard. There were berries and all the like. So me and Nash wake up early in the morning, climb up in the tree, apple tree, pick apples all day, put them in bags, and we would eat apples. I ate apples all day. Got sick as a dog, like just sick, sick, sick. So for the next 25, 30 years, I never ate an apple because I said to myself, apples make me sick. Until one day, I was in the office, they brought these taffy apples in, and you smell like that caramel and the apple. It's like, let me try apple again. And it was delicious. It was fine. I was waiting to get sick, didn't get sick. Then it dawned on me, apples don't make me sick. Eating a whole bag of apples is like to kind of like reframe that like epiphany, like, oh, well, maybe marriage doesn't suck. Maybe I'm not horrible in marriage.
Right.
Maybe it was just this situation that did not allow us to be our best for each other, right? So I don't have to live the rest of my life where I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm a horrible husband and no woman will ever, love me. What did therapy help you do? How did you experience that?
That's a good question. Therapy helped me to see me.
Mm,
There was a me that I thought that I knew, and but I wasn't really seeing who I really was, and I wasn't seeing who I could really be.
mm,
So therapy really helped me to see me, to see some of my patterns, to see, oh, why am I attracted to the women that I'm attracted to?
right.
Why does that? What is that all about? And then I had to talk about my mom, and so well, for me that was it was that, it could be something else for other folks.
Mhm,
So, but I really began to see me in ways that I had not seen me before, and I began to see situations from a you talk about perspective from a some different perspectives, but really helping me to understand what some of my blinders were and what patterns I had and why would I not explore certain habits of thought or thought patterns, or what was it about my religion
mhm,
and the way I was socialized in church that made me think and believe certain things a certain
mhm,
way,
right.
just blindly and just sort of mindlessly in some
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I saw myself, and I continue to search for ways to see me more as I understand me.
Mhm.
It helps me to, navigate the complexities of interpersonal relationships even better.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of hours talking about my religion and my church and the church I grew up in, the church I was there now. And I was carrying so much shame, guilt, condemnation, and I did not see how it was driving my perspective about myself and the decisions that I was making,
Right,
right?
right,
Because when in my church, you can never be any good anyway. Like you're always falling short, right? It's just this whole idea we were talking about it, like 99 and a half won't do, right? You could give your best. Like it's only 100. I get 99 and a half and I'm condemned because it ain't 100. That's basically what my religion even though 99 and a half may be the furthest point from zero, but get all of that and still, it's not enough. And I lived with this thing of being not enough or feeling like what I had accomplished or what I had done, I did it, but I couldn't be okay with it because on some level or another, maybe I'm a fraud, or maybe people think too much of me, and maybe I think too much of myself, or so I had all of these condemning things. It was changing. It was affecting how I was choosing relationships, how I chose to be in relationships, and it was like a Paul. I want at this point for you to talk about if you may have experienced differently the adverse effects of growing up a church kid and how that affects you in your adulthood in some ways that maybe aren't as healthy as we assume they are.
Yeah, I've come back to, I grew up Baptist, then I became Pentecostal, so I was Pentecostal too.
Mhm.
And I've gone back to my Baptist roots because, the Baptist is like one save, always save.
Free grace, right? You
Right.
know.
All the grace. And that is what really keeps my mind out of the shame, out of all of that. It is like I am more, let me say it like this. I am far more conscious of my righteousness than I am conscious of
Mhm.
the condition of sin that we're
Mhm.
born into.
Mhm.
So let me just say it like that, right?
Mhm.
But the adverse effect is, of course, a lot of shame. It's shame and guilt, and you know, and the church folks just not really understanding. I had shame and guilt around what I knew God was asking me to do, right? But
Right.
that's very biblical. A lot of people, you go through and through the scriptures, you're gonna find that. So I didn't feel like I was just oh, shame on me, get me, or like poor me that I'm having this experience. And so I'm still a bit I still carry the baggage to some degree of shame about my marriage, and especially with the couples that I counsel that are not married,
Mhm.
most specifically them,
Mhm.
right? Like I feel like some sort of hypocrite, right? But they've been gracious to me. They've been kind to me, and I've grown out of that. But every now and then I really think about, did I fail them,
Mhm.
right? Did I fail my kids? So I'm no longer spend a whole lot of time there, but that's the adverse effect of
Mhm.
churchanity, right?
Mhm.
On my life, and being far more conscious of that than knowing that God saw it and He could help me through it and wasn't surprised by it. And I'm still going to be what I need to be and do what I need to do. So, but yeah, I needed to be more conscious of my righteousness
Mhm.
and the price that Jesus paid, as opposed to all of the condemnation. I mean, we read the scripture, Pat. There's therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ
Yeah,
Jesus.
we didn't apply. Yeah, we never really
You
applied.
don't apply it, and then the church folk don't certainly don't help you
No,
in
no.
that way regard either. So yeah, man, I am I'm sort of grateful for the doctrine of growing up as a Baptist kid, because I know my shame would have been 10 times worse had I had a different experience. I'm
Sure.
sure if I was Pentecostal, it probably would have been different.
It's very it's exhausting.
Uh,
Yeah, and part of my growth, my spiritual growth, was shedding all of that. Right.
yeah,
I had to take off all of that. Like I understand the way they taught us. They were very sincere.
yeah,
Where that was their way of loving us and protecting us in some ways, but they lived with some guilt, shame,
yeah,
and they passed it down, right? And it's like I can't live. I'm not. That's not my personality. Like I can't live in that space, and I don't even want to. So a lot of therapy for me was untangling myself, right, from all of that stuff, and found great liberation in being a person, right, and to experience my humanity fully,
right,
right, and to live into all the joys and the pains and the pleasures and the traumas and all of that. Like you can't parse that out. It's all complicated and and one space. And so let's do this. You got two boys, two black boys, raising them in a slash era of Obama, Trump, and in light of George Floyd and Mike Brown and all alike. How has how has that been for you to help them navigate their space? Because they're like one of them teenager, right? And the other one you don't have two teenagers. One a teenager, one's almost a teenager.
He's 12. He's almost a
Yeah.
teenager when it's about to be
Ooh,
14.
man.
Yeah, I just figured, like my dad did, I've been I've been sowing a lot of seed and watering the seed, right?
Mhm.
Talking about systemic racism, white supremacy, talking about church, talking about God, talking about death, talking about girls and sexuality in general. I asked him the other day, "What is sex?" And they just start cracking up laughing. It's like, okay,
You gotta bro. Somebody got to broach the
somebody
conversation.
got to exactly, and so, but it's a challenge. But I thank God that they're good kids. They listen, they absorb, they ask good questions. They talk about racism a lot. They talk about God a lot, which is good. My dad scared the living daylights out of me. He used to say, "What do you think about politics?" And that was a whole conversation about race, God, religion, power, society, the whole, the whole thing. And I was so intimidated. And so I know I'm on a good path because one day my youngest, who's almost a teenager, said something to his brother about wanting different hair. And my oldest son came running down the stairs and said, Dad, Ian wants hair like a white boy. You need to talk to him." And it was a whole thing. And Ian was like, "No, I don't. That's not what I was saying." I was like, "Okay, let's talk about your hair."
Yeah.
Right. And so just that they have that level of awareness and consciousness about, and to say, "Oh, this," for my oldest, this could be a problem. For my youngest, to say, "Oh, no, that's really not what I was saying," is a good thing. And so, and the same with their faith. We talk about that and they ask very practical questions about God and the things in the scripture and all of that. So I feel very fortunate, but it's a challenge because you wonder, you know, Craig Barnett said something years ago, years and years ago. He's actually married to my god sister. I don't know if you knew that or not,
I didn't know
but
that.
yeah, I've got pictures of him and Donna on prom, right, and my mom's things.
Mhm.
So he said something, and we don't reproduce what we say; we reproduce who we are, right? Every kid, every seed reproduces after his own kind. So I have really taken that as a charge to be the man, right, that I want my boys to be.
Mhm.
Now, I don't want them to just be what I say. I want them to be who I am, and so that
Mhm.
challenges me to be better because I want to model that for them. So, it's day to day, water and seed, and trying to make the right decisions when they're around and when they're not.
What are your fears for them? Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I have the systemic fears around their interacting with the police. I have systemic fears about how they are being constructed, socially constructed to understand themselves in the school system, where white supremacy and norms of whiteness just reign supreme. I have concerns about if they're internalizing those messages, if they're internalizing negative messages about their skin, which is kind of what I referenced. And so those are my fears, and then like, oh, well, you're gonna grow up and be somebody, whatever that somebody is. And so, but I have systemic fears around their blackness, that I'm mostly concerned about, that I know that I'll try to help them navigate. I think that I've tried to expose them to as much as I can, but it's really concerns around how will their dark skin be impacted by where they live, where they go to school, who they interact with, their teachers, and how they see themselves. And so I'm constantly intentional about that narrative with them.
What are your hopes for them?
Right? That they will really learn that black is beautiful,
Mhm.
right? They're not ashamed. Thank God, right now they're not ashamed of being black. They're not ashamed of anything. They're very proud about that. But I also want them to grow in the Lord and grow in their faith, as well. So that's, and then be the men. that they see themselves to be. That is ultimately, what I want for them. And practically being, hey, I want you to have a job and, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's it. And for the older one who's about to turn 15, I tell him, I say, you're going to be grown, legally grown in 3 years. You got some stuff to figure out. Developmentally, he's still, he's a big kid. I'd rather him be a big kid than to be, out here, you know,
Mhm.
trying to be grown, but
Mhm.
he's just a big kid. So he'll continue to grow and mature. And so, but that's what I want for them.
Got you. So you mentioned this earlier that a couple of months ago, your mom transitioned, and it was sudden, and losing a parent is a thing. And they don't talk to us about, nobody talks to us about, like, well, what do you do when you you lose your parent, or your parents never say, one day, I might not be here, and this is what I want you to know, and these are kind of the things, like, we live thinking or assuming that everybody we live with will live with us forever, and so we're never really prepared for that. And so I lost my dad, you lost your mom, and losing a parent is one thing. I When your mom transitioned, I could not imagine myself losing my mother. Like, I could not, as much as I wanted to empathize with you, and I could to an extent. That mom thing, though, the way I love my mother and the way I know you loved your mother, and the other side of that, the way she loved you and the way my mother loves me, I was like, I can't. Like, I don't, like, I don't, so what, what happened? How did you process it? How are you processing it now? Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is. I think Oprah said something about some lawsuit she had to me. Or no, not the show, some show. She said it's the climb of my life. That's what she said.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I feel. It's the climb of my life. My mom and I were very close. We talked every day. We hung out on the weekends, and sometimes during the week when I wasn't working. And so it's hard. I mean, and my mom, both my parents who are deceased now, we would talk about them not being here. So my mom and I did all of this end of life planning together. I'm not gonna be here one day, so and I'm like, yeah, let's do this and let's do that. And where's this policy? Where are your passwords? Give me your pins. Had all of that. So it
Mhm.
made the that part, the operational part of it, simple. I had her phone, I had all of that stuff, but I don't know this world without her,
Mhm.
right? So I'm trying to understand how do I function in the world that I've always known with her, right? And I said I was going to write this out somewhere. Like, what happens when the womb dies, right? That my whole physiological composition is grieving my mother every day,
Yeah.
every day. And so there are a lot of tears, and there's a lot of just you know, affirming, and there's been some existential things with my faith and like where is she? Like all of this stuff better be real, right? Because if it ain't, we in trouble. We all in trouble,
Mhm.
And so and also working with a grief therapist, to help to say to me that this is normal. Thank
Yeah.
God I don't have any complicated grief, and so my parents and I had the kind of relationship where we talked about things and said I love you and all of that. So I don't have, thank God, I don't have any issues with we had to work through this thing we didn't or whatever.
Right.
So it's been really, 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 really hard. I can't even
It's
see her face sometimes because it'll make me
yeah.
cry.
It's interesting that as you get older with your parents, and I can say this about my mom. My mom is my friend, right? So some kind of way along the lines, you go from mother son, you grow up, and it's like, oh, this is my friend who takes up a lot of emotional space in my life.
Yeah.
When when my dad died, right? I am looking in the casket, and you say when, but with my dad is like, this is this is my point. Like this is how I got here,
How I
right?
got you. Right.
Yeah, and my reason for being here is here, and so I'm like, this is crazy. I said a few said a few things. I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. What I didn't have is what you have, right? You have sons who keep you grounded, kind of bring you back, like, oh, I have to keep both feet on the ground for them, right? They're your reason to kind of get up and okay, keep you engaged and maybe even bring you out of your grief, to kind of engage their world or what have you. When when my dad died, I got to live alone, right? So at the time my god sister was with me. She lived with me at the time. I said to her, like, okay, if you don't hear me come out of my room in like 3 days, you should knock on the door, because basically I was in a dark room, like I can't do it. Like, what? Because this crazy. Like, I remember being at the cemetery and we did the committal service. Bishop Larry Roberts did that. He was a very good close friend of my dad's. Did the committal, and I'm stuck. Like, so you telling me I'm just supposed to put my dad in the box,
And walk away.
a hole in the ground? I'm supposed to just bounce? Like, this is the craziest thing. Like, wait, what? Like, this is, do you know, like a whole part of me is like right here, and I'm supposed to walk away from it, and I don't know how to be. Um, I put it like this: the older we get, the hands that held us start falling away. Right? There's only a handful of people who knew me as a baby. There's only a handful of people who I could walk in a room and they'll love me just because I'm Patrick, not based off any performance or anything. Like, they've known me and nurtured me since I was a kid. You get older, you get in our 40s, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. You're counting them on fingers. Like, this is, my world is changing in some of the ways. How have you started piecing together a new existence and to understand that they never go away? It's just now I have to live with them a little differently because they're part of my conscience. They're in my heart. So they're present. I can't call on the phone. I can't hug. My grief was compounded. Well, it wasn't compounded, but there's a way your mind plays that it was like, oh, I haven't talked to my dad in a couple of days. He needs. I haven't talked to him. He's gonna call. I had to say out loud, he is not going to call. I was driving. He is not going to call. He is gone. Like, I had to rehearse because your mind starts moving away from the pain. It's like, oh, let me just make believe what happened didn't happen. Let me go like, and I had to bring myself back with my words and just like during the day, just say it. He's not going to call. He's gone. We buried him. You have to go from here. What's been your process like, besides
Yeah.
outside of therapy and
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, all of that. Like, oh, I need to check on my mother. I need to take her some food. I need to, what I'm learning is that, all of those neural pathways in the brain still exist and they still fire. And it's like, wait, and so you got to say and begin to talk about, and, it takes a while for your brain to say, hey, yeah, they're not, this is not happening, but those same pathways are there, so you're going to think about it. So yeah, it's been the same, but my process has been slow and piecing everything together. All of the memories, all of the the music, church. I can't. And my whole association with choirs and stuff like that is with my mom.
Yeah.
So it's been really difficult, and it's just my heart longs to see her, hear her, hug her. But oddly enough, I find myself laughing at something that we would have joked about. I find myself smiling, and this week I was just thinking about her. And every time I thought about her, I just said thank you out loud. I said, thank you, Mom. Thank you for being a good mother.
Yeah.
Thank you for the good memories. Thank you for, how you loved me relentlessly, that allowed for me to deal with all these crazy folks. Thank you for being such a phenomenal mother. Thank you. And luckily, I was able to say that to her before she died. Like,
Yeah,
not today,
you
'cause
know, like, that is, woo,
yeah,
that's key, right? That you can stand over a grave and know I loved you. You knew I loved you. I knew you loved me. There's no words left unspoken between us,
nothing is unspoken.
and so I can let you go if I have to, and not walk away. Be like, oh, I wonder, did they know? I should have
Yeah,
said this.
yeah,
I don't have. I didn't
yeah,
have that with my dad, and I don't have that with my mom. Like, I think that's why it's important for us when we are in each other's lives, when we love each other, whether that's our parents, whether that's our brothers, whether it's our sisters, our friends. You need to know, like, because maybe there come a day I can't tell you. I can tell you now, right? I love you. I'm here for you. If I'm somewhere else on the other side, I still love you, right? Like, and so I think that that really helps when you have to, take a turn in this road, but she loved me. She knew I loved her, and we're good. You
yeah.
know,
Good.
um,
Mhm.
we're good. And so, I'm with you. We're all, people who love you. We're with you. Every step of the way. Till the wheels fall off, till we part.
I
You
know, right?
know? But man, thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate it, taking your time out of your busy schedule
Thanks
to
for having me, man. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. You got to come back again.
Yeah, anytime.
Good.
We do it anytime.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us. I hope this was insightful. Where can they reach out to you on social media if they wanted to connect?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Just Marcus A. Campbell. You can find me there.
That's it,
It's
Marcus.
Dr. Marcus A. Campbell on I think it's Instagram.
Okay. Well, reach out to me. You can find me on Patrick D. Schaefer on Twitter and basically everywhere else. It's the same thing. I don't have aliases or anything.
You live in one life, huh?
Just one. That's all I got the energy for. That's it. But thank you, you all. I'll see you next week for another conversation. Be safe, wear your mask, socially distance yourself, be careful, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye bye.